Hi everybody, Claudio here. I'm one of the founders and senior recruitment consultants at Alex Young Recruitment. Welcome to the third episode of the FM channel podcast. And today I am joined by Hollie Pilling. Welcome, Hollie.
Hello, thank you.
Hollie is currently the facilities director for a company called Flexspace. And the reason that I've got Hollie on the show today is to discuss her career, which I believe is an interesting one so far, because a lot of people within FM tend to operate within the service provider market, or they work within managing agent and property companies or in-house, and not a lot tend to cross onto the other side, whereas Hollie has worked within all three and is currently in-house. So Hollie, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
So yeah, just wanted to discuss what I've just talked about just then. How did that come about? Was that kind of something that was planned all along for you when you kind of entered the industry, or did it kind of just fall into place as you kind of moved from one job to the next? And what was how have you managed to cross over into the three different sectors?
Yeah, I think it definitely wasn't planned from the word go. Obviously, I started in a service provider world, and then obviously as FM started to evolve, sort of the sexy side of FM became property management.
Yeah.
And FM when you're managing service charge. So I sort of went from service provider managing sort of the Met Police and other in Carillion, Virgin Media, etc. And then obviously got into the property management side. Obviously the biggest sticking point from coming from service provider to property management can be your service charge experience. But I was incredibly lucky that the guy that interviewed me realised that actually, as long as you've got budget or P&L experience, then effectively you can manage your service charge. Yes, there's a few more regulations and guidance that you need to go by, but actually the fundamental part of managing a service charge is managing a budget. You have a pot of money and it has to be spread out. And
absolutely,
so obviously, I had a really good mentor looking at service charge. And then unfortunately sort of 2008 to 2010 hit, and service charge management and FM property management wasn't as sort of lucrative in my eyes. As such, you didn't have your big sort of, high square footage service charges. They were cutting costs, management fees. Then they were starting to pile more properties onto a single, regional facilities manager. Yeah. And it came to a point where it wasn't the service that I was originally looking for. So then I did quite a big curveball and went over to who are, although they are a service provider, they are a total facilities management service provider. So they provide everything from help desk to PPM, everything. They benchmarked all the quotes, they controlled the whole supply chain.
Yeah.
And so that gave me the experience then to be able to really look at going in-house, because I had to work with every single element of facilities management, which was procuring the supply chain, managing it, setting the PPM, managing the client's budgets. We got a reactive and PPM spend that we had to deliver presentations to the client. So everything as I went along, all sort of the experience then become relatable to the next job. So I think for me, the biggest thing is just being able to transfer any experience you've got into something that you can use somewhere else. So I said about the budgets, a budget is a budget. It doesn't matter if it's a service charge budget, P&L budget, spend budget. You've got one pot of money to spend. Client management is the same, whether you're a property manager dealing with an asset manager, or whether you're dealing with a client, or actually it's an internal client and you're dealing with the board within the company that you work for. So it's just really sort of transferring all those skills along. And FM's an evolving beast. It always has been. It's constantly evolving. It's gone from your typical bogs and boilers and a very hardline male-led industry to something where they've realised that there is more of a customer service and there is more of a client relationship element to FM now. It's not just turning up, fixing something and then going home. It's about trying to turn the building around to be a profitable, manageable building that's going to give the client, the landlord, or whoever owns the property the biggest return on their asset.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you made the move from service provider to the property side, did you find it difficult to get interviews or get in front of property companies? Because I found when recruiting within the sector, you know, presenting candidates who have got from one side to go to the other, I have always found that, oh, well, they're kind of more service provider side. They've not got a service charge budget. How did you kind of overcome that then at the interview stage? Or, you know, did you find it easy to get interviews for the property side?
Yeah, in a way, I think because I had the total facilities management, and, you know, I found very early on that I didn't like being in a meeting, regardless of whether it was service provider or not, and not understand sort of the total technical element. So
Yeah.
I was quite lucky to get a HVAC qualification quite early on in my career.
Yeah.
So I think that was quite a big sales point. So sort of the service charge budget side of things wasn't a massive element, because there was obviously other qualities that they saw in my CV that probably assisted in doing that. And I think as long as you can show, like I said, willingness and the able to transfer your skills to another element of facilities management, I think, you know, the hiring manager would be extremely short-sighted to completely remove a CV from the list if they've got, you know, great qualities of everything else, but they don't have service charge management. Because ultimately service charge management is something very, very easy to pick up. It's just being transparent, because you're effectively spending somebody else's money. It's not really that hard to grasp. So I think it was probably short-sighted. And it's like I said, I was incredibly lucky that the guy that interviewed me obviously saw past that and realised that he could probably, the elements of the service charge I didn't know, he could teach me very quickly. And to be honest, once you've reconciled and built a service charge budget once, it's you know, pretty easy to continue. And it's like I said, to be fair, it's really no different to a P&L budget. If you know, managing a P&L budget can be more difficult, because you're actually spending your own money at that point. You know, I've got a P&L budget now with Flexspace, and it's Flexspace money. So I have to justify every single penny, because ultimately that's coming off of my business's bottom. Whereas when you're spending a service charge, you're spending multiple businesses' money. So as long as you've got adequate justification, you know, it's there. But whereas when you're managing a P&L, you know, there's business cases to build, etc. Really need to demonstrate that as a service charge, because you've got your budget lines there already. So arguably P&L is probably possibly a bit trickier, really.
So now you're with Flexspace, so you've now gone in-house and you kind of stepped up to that facilities director role, so that's awesome. So tell me about that. How did you, from your previous company to this one, were you looking to go in-house now, or were you kind of...
I think obviously going from the previous company, I went from being sort of an account manager, which is, you know, the same thing as a facilities manager, or a little, you know, quite more heavily in the client relationship side of things, to going into consultancy and project management. And then it got to the point where I sort of got a little bit tired of doing all this hard work of looking around people's buildings, looking at where they needed to improve their buildings, their energy efficiency, their equipment, you know, their M&E, putting life cycle surveys in, PPM plans, putting it in front of a client as a service provider, and the client going, oh yeah, okay, that's great. Not coming back to you, and then taking that in-house and going, look what I've done, you know, I've gone. And you sort of think, you know, that's a lot of work that's gone into it. So it got to a point where I thought, you know what, if I'm going to put this work into a set or a building, then I want to do it for the client, where it's going to benefit the business that I'm working for, and obviously the longevity of my career. So it was a decision to go in-house at that point, because I thought, you know what, if I'm going to put all that work in, I'd like to be the one that gets the pat on the back, rather than, you know, the head of the client that goes, oh look, I've procured this contractor and look what they've done, aren't I amazing? And that's as sort of as far as it went. So it's probably a little bit selfish as to why I wanted to go in-house.
No, it's all good. It's all progression at the end of the day. And I think what's interesting about your career as well is that you've not, I don't want to say that you've moved around a lot, but you kind of seem to have not moved. But historically, people like to see, you know, 5 years plus on everybody's CV. But you stayed in places probably sort of maybe 3.5 years, and then moved on to the next position and moved up each time. So is that a case of that you kind of got to a point where you feel like I've progressed as far as I can go, now start to have a look again before you get stale? Or
I think I've always been the sort of person that likes to go into somewhere where there's potentially a challenge. So, you know, you go in, got a difficult client, or there's a set of buildings that haven't been looked after, or there's a building that tenancy level's really low, and then looking to improve the outlook to, increase the leases. So I've always enjoyed sort of being that troubleshooter, and I suppose it does get to a point where you hit sort of a plateau, and you do start to get hungry. But I've always had this motto of the fact that unfortunately nowadays, if you want a promotion and a pay rise, you tend to have to look outside the business that you're in. I think, businesses get very comfortable. They can see that there's somebody that's working really hard, achieving all their targets, and they just think, yeah, that's great. That person will just, keep them ticking over.
Yeah.
You get sort of, it's almost like if you don't shout very loud, you sort of, get forgotten about a little bit. So I've always found that if you go then look to move on and you showcase, some of the stuff that you've done in your previous job, a lot of other businesses are like, oh, wow, we could really do with somebody like this in our business and get that jump up. As you said, I've worked for quite a few different companies, been there to sort of 3 to 3.5 years. And I've had a promotion in one of them because it's always gone either external, because they can maybe cut their salary a little bit, or they cut what they're looking for it. So, it does become quite difficult. So yeah, I've always found, and it's only a thing that I've ever done, but
I agree with kind of with you. I think it's good to move, good to spread your wings and kind of see if you can implement what you've learned in your previous roles. And I think it's quite easy because, like you say, with some of the bigger companies, they tend to hold you back maybe without wanting to. That the client's happy, they seem happy, they're not complaining, so we'll just leave them there without the kind of progression and the promotion that everyone likes to talk about at interview stage, that they're good at all that, and then sometimes never materializes. I think you're kind of living proof that it's good to move around, as long as you're kind of not doing it every 6 months, of course.
I
think if you get to a point, you've learned something that you can take away and implement in your next job, then that's a way forward.
And I think, I find that there's probably nothing quite more as insulting as something when you hand your notice in and they go, oh, well, what can we, do to make you stay? Well, we'll give you a pay rise. And you're like, well, I've always been really, really honest in all my performance reviews and everything. I've always said, I'm looking to progress in my career. I'm looking to go up that next level. So it's never been one of those options where I've been in a appraisal or anything like that, and no one's been aware that I've been hungry to move up. And it's always like, okay, we'll consider it. We're looking at structure, cost, business, we're looking at, at times tough, etc.
Yeah.
And it's only sort of when you do go, okay, look, I'm going, they go, oh, well, okay, well, what can we do? And you're like, well, I'm really sorry, but my mind's made up now, of my head of the business. So,
and I think if you're kind of honest from day one and say, this is why I'm here, I'm looking to progress, I'm looking for that kind of progression to join a company that can offer that, then it's no surprise to them if, you have to move on.
And I think employers need to sort of appreciate when you've got somebody that is relatively young or anything, they are, there's very few, young professionals out there that aren't looking to climb, ladder. So I think that's, that's a massive thing when it comes to recruitment and sort of HR and looking at appraisals and stuff like that, to go, actually, this person has got a career ahead of them.
Yeah.
And we do to nurture it, because the amount of money that must be wasted on times for inductions and recruitment.
Massively.
And, not that I'll shout that.
There she goes.
Ouch. But you know what you mean. They spend a lot of money on recruitment fees to find the right person.
Yeah.
And think, invest that money on trying to keep that person, move them up, and then you've got the level below them ready for recruitment. It's just that natural churn, but you're actually progressing and keeping good stuff at the same time. Yeah,
absolutely. And what would you say have been the biggest kind of challenges, I guess? And that's a bit of a too big a question, maybe. I don't know. In terms of the service provider side, property companies, and now in-house, which of the three do you feel is kind of the more challenging, or are they just different challenges that each business kind of presents?
Yeah, I think there's different challenges that each, business tries to prevent. You tend to find with service providers, there's so much competition in the market when it comes to tendering for contracts, that they always come in, they always undercut what they need to. They'll always look to cut costs. So they'll spread staff around. You'll have, 3 for every, 40 buildings, or, anything like that. The slow, and you physically just can't deliver what they've tendered for. So
Yeah.
start the first 6 months, the client gives you that 6 months bedding in period. You're doing, you know, they think, oh, okay, you get to the first year, you're not doing great, but the client's like, oh, bet the devil, you know, you get to the 3 to 5 year point and they look to retender you. Because, you know, the competition is so fierce in the service provider part. I think with property management, obviously with management fees and everything that does heavily weigh out the service charges. Again, you know, you've got issues with clients, especially into the current climate with COVID, you know, going bust, etc., like that, not being able to recover service charge fees, you know, and then you're constantly sort of trying to rob Peter to pay Paul as such, because, you know, there's always a list of priorities of what you pay out the service charge budget first. So you're constantly trying to balance that. Again, you know, as a regional FM for property management, you're looking at having to anywhere between 25 and 30 buildings. They like you to order it every month, you know, audit them every month. You're then doing 30 reconciliations, you're doing 30 service charge budgets. You know, 9 out of 10 times, none of those service charge budgets fall in the same quarter. So you're constantly, you know, sitting around trying to do that, signing off invoices and everything, coding them. You know, everything does have its own challenges. And then obviously when you go client side, you know, the massive challenge is the climate, because, you know, you aren't protected by a larger business that you could potentially TUPE somewhere else or move somewhere else within the business. You know, if you're working client side and unfortunately that client doesn't make it through a tough period, you know, you find yourself out on your own. Whereas, you know, to some of the large service providers or a larger property management company, you've got that security of potentially moving to a different fund or a different client or a different, you know, a different department that you can transfer those skills to. So, you know, there's challenges on both sides. And I think in my eyes, a lot of them is just exciting as the other. And it's what makes people hungry, you know. A lot of FMs, I think, you know, if they're honest, love the job because it's never the same. It's not the same every day. You don't go in and do the mundane. You know, 1 minute you've got one issue and then a day later you might have something completely different. You know, you're constantly learning and evolving on the job. And I think that's what makes FMs who they are. You know, they're massively resourceful. You know, they're completely, you know, able to pretty much turn their hand at anything that comes at them within, you know, the building and the FM side of things. And I think, you know, that's what makes us that different breed apart from everybody else, really.
It's all about juggling, isn't it? Juggling a million and one things at any one time and not knowing what's going to happen over the weekend when you go on a Monday. There's been a flood in the basement or in the plant room or whatever. It's I can imagine.
You know, and I think the current COVID issues goes to show that you can have as many plans and you can have major incident management training and you can have business continuity plans, but nothing can ever prepare you for something that's, you know, there's always something that's unforeseen. And you know what, I think, you know, you've seen it that a lot of people you know, the NHS have done fab, you know, services have done brilliantly, but, you know, people have got to remember there's been a lot of FMs that have worked throughout the lockdown, managing buildings, keeping these buildings up, keeping these hospitals running, engineers fixing stuff through the night to make sure, you know, things are done. You know, the facilities management on the hospitals and the pop-up testing sites and everything, you know, they go really unrecognised, a lot of it. But
a lot of the time they do. It's kind of like they're front of the line. And I think FM's always been kind of in the background, because if the building is running smoothly, then you don't know FM exists, which is kind of how you want it to be. But at the same time, you only really know about FM when you want to complain that the office is too cold or too hot. They're your classics, aren't they? Let's face it. It's like,
it is a hugely.
Why is this not working? The toilet's not working. And it's kind of, everyone thinks, oh, FM, that's all it is. It's just like, don't they just clean the toilets or whatever? It's kind of, it's so much more than that, you know, to buildings nowadays, especially now with new modern technology that's kind of going to be moving in to not replace people, but help buildings run smoother. It's going to be interesting.
You know, we've always had elements of that. And, you know, FM's a hugely thankless task. It's like you said, you know, I think you could probably, any FM could probably count on one hand the amount of times that someone's walked up to them and gone, oh, do you know what? Thanks. You know, you've done it. You know, you're doing really well. It's said, this isn't working, this light's not working, the lift's not working, you know, etc. And, you know, we've always had sort of a BMS or building management systems and technologies that come in. But again, you know, that's only as good as the infrastructure that it's put in. And you'll need someone to manage that infrastructure for it all to work. So there's always going to be an element where you're going to have to require boots on the ground to manage FM. It's never ever going to be able to go completely remote.
People industry. It really is.
Yeah.
Cool. So finally, what would your advice be to younger people looking to get into FM, or who have maybe just started out their career in FM? What would your advice for them to be moving forward? Progress.
I think, you know, do as much training as you can. If you can get real all-round technical soft services, there's so many different elements of help out there. You've got BIFM, you've got, you know, RICS, you've got everything like that that can assist you and just broadening your knowledge base. And, you know, I've always said from the word go, FM is massively set around organisation. If you can organise stuff and you're meticulous and you know how to manage things, you can be an FM, because it's all about ensuring, you know, PPMs are carried out on time. Are you checking things, doing your audits? And as long as you've got really strong diary management and you're actually really organised, you're actually going to do really well in FM. The rest you can pick up, you know, as much as a lot of training courses are great, you read it out of a book, you never really gain your experience until you're actually fighting it on the front line. You know, if there's a fire in the building, or a fire, you know, drill, or power goes out, or you lose the grid, you know, actually in a book you can go, right, yeah, these are the steps I'm going to follow. But in that book, you don't have 4 tenants at your door shouting at you going, I can't work, my computer's not on, I'm losing money, you know, what are you doing about it? You've trying to sort of put that whole element into things. So getting experience on the ground, being organised, and getting some sort of real solid training on technical and sort of budget management side of things, and you'd be, you know, it is a great job. FM is great. It's like I said, we do it, we complain about it, but we love it because we wouldn't carry on doing it otherwise, you know. Absolutely.
Why would you? It's, like I say, it's kind of such a thankless role that, you know, if you're kind of looking for someone to pat you on the back every time you do something well, then it's probably not the
no, you've got to have broad shoulders. But you know, it's like I said, it's the thrill of the chase, isn't it? It's the waking up, putting your laptop on and thinking, what am I looking forward to today then?
yeah, absolutely. Cool. So, Hollie, I really appreciate your time. Thanks very much. Hopefully a few people can take away something from that and be inspired. But it's been a pleasure speaking to you. Appreciate your time. Speak to you soon.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.